the camera's smaller. This one.
All right, I'll move over.
I don't know if this one shows people appearing. Okay, it does. So we're back.
Whoops. Hang on. Let me text some people that we're back on.
We're talking about Enneagram with Charlie. This week, we will not have a live stream next week because it's 4th of July. We do these live streams every week on Wednesdays at 7. Sorry about the technical difficulties that happened this week. Guess our internet's still not great, so I switched my phone. Just let us know in the comments if our sound ever drops or the video ever drops. Gonna wait for a few people to join and then we'll get started. So if you're watching this on a replay, just skip forward a little bit. Again, we're talking about the Enneagram with Charlie this week. I will post a bunch of links at the end of this video that was in the original video that I deleted.
Hello.
Hello.
So,
Welcome to the talk. Okay, we're gonna get started.
all right. Hang on. Okay. So I have this book with me. Sorry if that's distracting. But it's just for reference. I'm here to talk, I guess, about Enneagram, except for the fact that I can't talk about it too much because we don't have the technical resources and stuff to, like, basically, you can't learn this without visuals, and you can't learn this in just a few, in, I don't know how long are these, like an hour, a half hour, whatever.
Yeah, the longest I got is an hour. I don't think I went over that, but we'll talk till we run out of steam, so that's normally about an hour long.
Mm-hmm.
So let's first start, like, with what it is, like the basics. Why should we learn about the Enneagram?
Well, I guess in order to know the why, you should probably know what it is first. It is simplest term would to call it a personality type sort of test, but I don't really like those words exactly because I feel like when you kind of wind up equating those to your regular run-of-the-mill sort of test that
like a BuzzFeed quiz,
like a BuzzFeed quiz or something like that, or even something like MB Myers-Briggs, which is something that I'm not too sure is actually that credible. But this isn't so much of a personality typing sort of thing. It's more like we all have patterns of thinking, and we all have ways that we
It's like how you make decisions.
It's almost like that, yeah. How you make decisions, and almost how you perceive the world. Because the one thing you'll notice about, like, everybody is that everybody has completely different perceptions most of the time of how things are and how the world works. And you'll find yourself disagreeing with somebody even on just, like, a memory of what happened. I think anyone who grows up with siblings can know that perceptions can be warped.
Well, I know growing up with autism, social interaction was always very difficult, understanding, like, why someone did the things they did and said the things they said. And I've always looked up social cues and all those kind of things. And the Enneagram's been really cool to, like, help me understand that, and it almost simplifies it. I don't want to say simplify because that's, like, watered down, but it, like, helps me to go, okay, someone who uses this pattern of thinking or has this fear or has this desire is going to make a completely different decision than I would make, rather than, oh, this body language is telling me this, which it could, like, when that's broken down, it's like, well, someone who smiles is happy. Well, that's not true. There's always, like, there's nervous smiles, mad smiles. There's, like, all different. Where with, like, the Enneagram, you can go, okay, if that's what they're thinking, then that makes sense how they're acting. And now I understand where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm. It can be very hard to understand where people are coming from when you're on the autism spectrum. I wouldn't so much call it a lack of empathy. I don't like that. I would actually call it more theory of mind. Theory of mind is basically the understanding that there are people, it's basically understanding that there are people different from you, and it's that way where you can sort of understand another person's mind, in a sense, that the world is not full of people like you, in a sense. Empathy feels more like if you see somebody get hurt, you feel sad or something like that, or you feel bad about it. That feels more like what empathy is. That's a watered down version of it. I think the thing of autistic people don't lack empathy, because when an autistic person sees somebody who's in pain.
Albus, quiet. Albus, quiet.
Because when an autistic person sees somebody who is in pain, then basically you do, and when an autistic person sees, sorry, my brain is totally off from the barking, but when an autistic person sees somebody in pain, they'll definitely register that as, oh, that's definitely bad, and
that's not good.
It's not good. There's also the issue of things like the performance of empathy versus the feeling of actually feeling it. You might notice that some people have this very fake sort of way of expressing empathy, and some people will feel empathy, but they won't know exactly how to express it, how to come across as that. They'll just be like frozen in place, like, oh, how do I deal with this now? How do I make this person stop crying, is basically. I wouldn't so much call it a lack of empathy so much as I would call it a lack of performance. But that's a topic for another time. What the Enneagram helps you understand is, in a sense, theory of mind. And it's basically to help autistic people with the thing that they struggle with. The things is like social cues, the thing is like understanding other people. Understanding that other people, I guess, have different perceptions in a way. And also, but I would be wary of using this personality typing system to constantly be typing other people. In a sense, I don't recommend using this as your primary way of understanding the world. You should be able to understand it from your own point of view, through your own just ways of. It's a blueprint to another person's mind, but it's not everything. It's but it is very detailed, and it is very complex. Its main use for me is also a way of understanding yourself, not just yourself, but your problems, your fears, and where you need to go. Every type, there's 9 types, and every single type has basically a sin or a passion that oftentimes will lead them to be their biggest hindrance. Like for me, I'm a type 9, so my passion is sloth. Sloth does not simply mean laziness, since 9s can be quite active and quite accomplished. Rather, it refers to a desire to be unaffected by life. It is an unwillingness to arise with the fulfillment of one's vitality to fully engage with life. This rings very true to me, and it's my own, willingness to not be affected by anything that makes it so hard for me to interact with the world, to do things, to be myself. And I'll find myself constantly falling into this pattern of, oh, God, I just want to go to sleep. I want to sleep through everything. I want to not be affected by anything. I'm just so tired. But then there are times, occasionally, moments of light where I can actually find myself turning this sort of into action, where I'll say, like, I do have these emotions, and I am very emotional about these things, but I don't need to necessarily be affected by it. I'm just going to do these things, and I'm going to just fix what's the problem, and I'm going to do it with no emotions attached. And that's almost, in a way, that's how I usually turn that sort of sloth into the virtue of action. And action for me is just doing it, basically.
Well,
not doing it.
To backtrack just a little bit, what you're covering is each of the types have something that hinders them, and the Enneagram goes into depth on what that is and how to overcome it. And so specifically the example we're using is type 9, and their hindrance is sloth, right?
Yes.
And so what's helpful about the Enneagram is it explains to you how you can further develop and create a life for you that is more wholesome and just more fulfilling, and how to get to a better place based on how you think and your decision making and your personality type.
However, I think that for me, and I think for everybody else on this thing, they'll find that the virtue is a kind of a scary thing, something that almost seems impossible to reach. I think of the word action, and I think, that's not me. That's impossible sometimes. Sometimes I just think, I can't be that way. It's a very hard uphill climb, basically. And in order to do it, you need to also have some sort of self-understanding. You need to kind of also let go of some of the walls that you wind up putting up. There's two types of people in this world besides the 9 types. I find that this has nothing to do with them, but there's actually 2 types of people in this world, and there's people who are constantly seeking out information about themselves and wondering who they are and why. And then there's everybody else in this world, the majority of this world, who basically doesn't feel this way, likes to ignore that sort of stuff about themselves, the scary information, and likes to live in that sort of blissful ignorance where they don't need to worry about themselves or any deep conversations, or they don't need to understand who they are, basically. Or they just wind up wrapping themselves up in lies. In order to really use the Enneagram to its full extent, you need to really break that barrier that you have for yourself. You need to lay down all of those walls. And granted, you're probably still going to have a few walls up even if you are using it right, but you basically cannot be afraid of yourself. And it's not, and that's also why I hate it when I find other people who are using the Enneagram. I hate it when I see that other people who use the Enneagram wind up using it in order to type other people. Like, they'll do it by saying, oh, you're definitely a 6. And I'll be like, no, you don't use it that way. Because when you use it that way, people will be on their guard, basically. They'll be like, no, I'm not. Or they'll be like, sure, whatever. And they'll think that you're just using something in order to really understand them.
I think
you're labeling them without basically a consent.
I think you can, but I think you can use it in that way, but there's a respectful way to do it.
There is a respectful way to do it.
You can disagree with someone and think you're a different type than they self-identify, if that makes sense to you as to why they're acting that way. But don't go, you're not that way, you're this way. Because, like, when it comes to anything, like, everyone thinks they know themselves best, and that's very disrespectful. But if you think they're a different type and that makes sense to you, I think you can use that personally, but
Yeah, use it personally.
I wouldn't argue that with the other person try to change their mind, especially not in a negative way that like you were describing.
Yeah. If you use it in that way, then people will wind up being.
And even if if like, because you're type 9, if I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, that's such a type 9 thing to say, I hate that, that's not the way you use, that's not a respectful way to use the Enneagram either.
Well, yeah, but sometimes
Yeah.
I do that with my therapist specifically, but that's a different
Yeah.
relationship. You also got to worry about the relationships
Yes.
that you're in.
Yeah, that's very true, depending on the person. But like, I wouldn't go around just like going up to people going, oh, you're type 6, don't do that. Right?
Yeah.
So there are respectful ways and disrespectful ways to use the Enneagram as well. So be aware. But it can be a useful tool if used correctly.
Mm-hmm. So it's helped me personally in a lot of ways, but it's so much more complicated than I am actually making it out to be. I've only barely scratched the very surface of it. There's
Well, what I really like about it is you're affected by other types, and like you can move to other types. So it's not just like, oh, you're this and you're only this.
right. You are one type and you have that type as your core type. But besides that type, you wind up touching, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, you wind up touching about 5 types, including your own. 5 out of 9, basically. Which is, you have the 2 types that are right next to you. Like if I'm a 9, I have 1 and 8 touching me, and then I have the 2 that I move to in stress or in integration, basically. And that was, for me, would be 6 and 3. But so it's actually, it all has to do with the symbol, which I'm going to have to ask you to look up since we don't have any visuals. So, but it's it's a circular sort of diagram where each of the types sort of stand, and you move from point to point, and you have one core type, but you touch a bunch of others. And
yeah, we're like, in a lot of personalities, I'm like, well, on a good day, I'm different to answer these questions than I am on a bad day. And so with the Enneagram, that's all taken into account, where it tells you what your personality type is on a good day, a regular day, a bad day. And even in between days, it has all of that covered. So it shows these are all your different sides, and how that affects you, and how you can, and it shows you how to go from that bad day to that good day.
it's also, another thing about it is that it's also 3-dimensional in the sense that it has different descriptions of the levels of health that each type goes to, which is to say, level 1 being enlightenment, basically. You are self-actualized, and almost nobody I know is like this. But it's the healthiest of all the types, and it basically means you are perfect. And level 9 is a nightmare, basically. You are on the verge of collapse. No, you are collapsed, basically. Your mind this is your breaking point. You don't want to get to level 9. You want to. Most people tend to stay in the average range. Sometimes people can get in the lower healthy range that I've seen, and it's always good to see people like that. And with this, you can also see that every type has the potential to be something great, and also something very evil and bad. Doesn't really have anything to do with your type. That's why they're all numbers. Numbers are just numbers, basically. There's no good or bad thing about them. You're not better because it's not like there's not really a hierarchy, really. It's just it's a circle and they're numbers. Sometimes we have labels to describe which types of numbers, but nobody's really fully agreed on which labels you would have for those. So we just use the numbers for the most part. There's also subtypes, which are very interesting in my opinion. The
subtypes are like the ones with the wings, right?
Well, you can have a wing that's one way or the other, but the subtypes are actually something different. You can have everybody shares the same 3 subtypes that they can have.
Okay.
You can have.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
It's. Somebody told me to imagine it like it's a chair, basically, with one good leg, one leg that might be a little bit shorter than the other, and then one leg that's just broken, so essentially a non-functional chair. Everybody is a bad chair, basically, a bad 3-legged chair. Your main leg is basically you have 3 instincts, basically. You have the social instinct, the self-preservation instinct, and the sexual instinct. Or the sexual instinct is what it's called, but I like to call it the relational instinct, because people get really peeved by the word sexual, so I just say relational, because that actually makes more sense to me anyways. Each of these are basically survival instincts in a sense. The social instinct is that feeling that all people have, which is to be in a group, to be a part of a group, to socialize and to just be in. It's like groups, basically. The self-preservation instinct should be pretty obvious, but it's basically you want to take care of your own needs and wants first, and everything else comes second. And the relational instinct is essentially, a lot of people will take this as finding the beloved or finding the one. This could mean finding a lover, or it can mean finding a really good friend. What it is basically one-on-one relationships. You enjoy that sort of depth with somebody else. It's a very passionate type. All relational subtypes that I know have been very, very passionate people and very deep feeling people. Sometimes people can get mixed feelings about whether they're relational or social. I always say, do you prefer like texting somebody one-on-one, or do you prefer a group chat? And I always say I prefer group chats myself. So that's probably why I'm more social than I am relational. But if I wasn't social, I probably wouldn't be doing this in front of a bunch of people, because I love being the center of attention of a group of people. But I am mainly, though, self-pres myself. I do put myself first in a lot of things, and I do take care of myself before I take care of other people, and sometimes that can be a little bit difficult for other people, and it can be difficult for myself, because I'm not sure how well that'll work out in a relationship, but we'll see eventually. Essentially, each of these instincts go together. You have one main one secondary one, and then you have one that's like barely there. And for me, it's self-pres, social, and relational. And each of these exist within the different subtype. Each of these exist within the different types, and they show up differently in each type. Like a self-pres 9 will look much different than a self-pres 3 or a self-pres 7, because a self-pres 9 will probably be more introverted. A self-pres 3 might actually be a little bit more extroverted, and the same with the self-pres 7 too, because those are technically more extroverted types. Of course, I don't really truly believe in the extrovert-introvert dichotomy sort of thing. I kind of believe that everything is something in the middle, but you'll see more extroverted qualities in a 7 or in a 3 than you will in a 9. Of course, the difference between the subtypes in 9 can be it can completely blow your mind how different a relational 9 would be to a social 9 or a self-pres 9 or any sort of way. What this does is it mixes things up even more and causes even more depth. If there's one thing you want to take out of that, it's that it's just the next layer, basically, to once you find out your type, this becomes the next layer of it all, the next differentiating thing, essentially. And it's why even if all members of one type will always be different people in the end. However, they're different people who share a very similar pattern of thinking, a very similar pattern of thought. And sometimes they won't even always wind up relating to each other in any other way. Maybe their personalities could be completely different, which is why I don't really like to call it a personality type, because I've known 9s who are completely different from me. I would say that they do not share my personality, but they share but I do relate to them in many ways. But yeah.
So there's the self-identification part of the Enneagram. I know you talked about where the one you identify with is more important, and I really like that about it, where there's so many, you take a quiz and this is yours, where with the Enneagram there's more, when you look through the types, normally there's one that stands out. The people I've known to go through it were yeah, this is all the other ones don't make sense, except obviously the 9s.
Yeah.
Where so many personality quizzes, all of the answers, you're any of them could be me. With the Enneagram, there seems to be this one is me.
Well, because there's a type on there that says that's basically you relate to everyone else, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why I said the 9s relate to all of them.
Yeah.
But for all the other types that I've noticed, there's it's shocking how you go through all of them. They're this is the only one that could possibly be me. Where in other personality tests I've seen, there's everyone's just I don't know which one is me. I'm a little bit of this, I'm a little bit of that.
If I were to recommend any avenue in pursuing what your own type is, what I'd recommend is you can go ahead and take a quiz first, but do some reading also, and do some reading on which type might fit you. And even more than that, I would recommend, even if you really want to get into it, buy some books, because there's a lot of good books out there. This one is, can they see this good?
Yeah, they should be able to see that.
All right, well, it says The Wisdom of the Enneagram, and it's by Don Richard Riso and Russ Hudson. Are we good?
Yeah.
I would also recommend anything by Helen Palmer, myself. There's a few others that I have, not with me right now, but those two authors that are the ones that I would probably recommend. I remember I just had this book, my therapist gave it to me, and we had sort of identified my own type together, but what she did was she gave me this book, like, as a present, and I looked through it, and I had it in my dorm, and I was procrastinating a lot, but I decided I'd just read this, and I did. I read basically the whole thing, out of order, but I did read it cover to cover, basically. I might as well have memorized it. It's this thick thing. But it was interesting. I found myself not only interested in myself, but also interested in who my family was and everything else, and not just who my family was, but I also like to use it for my own writing too. I like to do a lot of writing. I like to make characters and stuff, and this also helps me with that. This helps me with writing character archetypes and making them more solid, because essentially this is a good solid outline as to how people work, in a sense.
As I was, because my parents also did the Enneagram, as I was going through learning about all the types and the way they think, with each one has like a big fear and a big desire that narrates a lot of their decision making. And as I was watching my parents interact, I could see this at play, and I almost like wanted the Enneagram to be wrong and be like, it's not that simple. But I watched them where it says my dad on a stressing day goes to a 7, which like, and he pretends that there isn't a problem. It doesn't exist. Where my mom goes to 5, and she's like, we need to solve this problem. And like every fight they've ever had is due to this reason. My mom goes, there is an issue that needs solving. And he goes, I don't see an issue. And they start bickering over that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is how, this really is real, how this decision making works. How the typing affects people. And it made like that, those arguments make sense, where before I was like, I don't even know why they're fighting. And now I'm like, it makes so much more sense. They're doing the one thing that would irritate each other the most in those moments.
Acknowledging the problem versus ignoring the problem.
Yes. I don't see any questions. Are questions coming in?
Yes, lots.
Ooh.
Okay.
All right.
I'm gonna.
Okay, we're gonna do
answer
some questions
I'm gonna
now.
help you get the questions.
Can I read it on your?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting.
Okay. We haven't seen any questions come in a while, so we kept talking, but we'll go through and look at your questions and answer them.
Yes. Apparently there were a lot. I'm honored.
I'll get there.
Okay.
Sorry. Technical difficulties over here too.
All right.
But thank you for watching. If you want to know more about the Enneagram, Charlie is going to put on a workshop. To register for the workshop, there you can go to OurTism.com and click on events, and you'll see her workshop.
So you can't see who's on?
No.
Anything? All right.
Do you have a link to one online that you would recommend if you wanted to take an Enneagram test? I looked up using the Enneagram Institute and just looked through the descriptions.
Yeah, the Enneagram Institute is probably the best site.
You can pay for a quiz, but I don't think you need to.
Yeah, personally, I don't think you need to either. If you want, though, there are free quizzes. I've known people to have taken them. I wouldn't take everything that they have at face value, but if something, I would maybe say take multiple and then check what you get if you get a bunch of different things.
What I did with my sister is I actually just went through the fears and the desires, and she's like, I only identify a little bit with 2. And then we went through the type of 2, and she's like, that is perfectly me. That is who I am. I don't know if that's the norm or not.
No, that's actually the way that I would personally recommend. I've known everybody to take a quiz, but I'm always like, I don't know if quizzes are the best way to do this. I think that the best way to do this might actually be to identify your main fear, and everybody has.
And if you identify with all of them, you're a 9. If you only identify with one of them, that's probably your type. So hers was like fear that she's unlovable and she wants to be loved. And there's the 9, that's fear of being controlled. They want to be in control. And so there's all the different ones. If you go through that, there'll be one that you identify with. And then that type's probably you. I would say that's the best way to do it. But there are quizzes if you want to take a quiz and looking through the types.
How long has this been available? Since, oh boy, like ancient times, honestly. It might be about as old as astrology. Let me see. There's information on this somewhere about, like, in this book, about its origins.
It's really old.
It's really old.
It's not new.
It's not new at all. But you probably haven't heard of it before because it's more obscure, and yeah, it's
there. If you go to the Enneagram Institute, the website, there is a history page on there that talks all about the Enneagram. There's like all these different philosophers that used different things from the Enneagram. And it has a history of how it was used throughout history. I don't think
we don't know how it really originated.
Where the origin is. I don't think it's
I don't think anybody knows. But the symbol itself has been around for a very long time. Yeah. And it's kind of, there's a lot of, it's kind of shown up in a bunch of different religions, and it's interesting.
There were a lot of famous names, I remember when I looked through there a little bit, that popped up that used the Enneagram. How do you determine your type? And we just covered that.
Yeah.
Hello? Oh, we got a lot of hellos. All right, give examples.
Of?
I don't know what we were talking about.
Yeah, at the time, you were talking, giving great descriptions of and definitions. So that's when we were trying to say, okay, give an example of how you would use that.
Oh, okay.
So it's backtracking.
Okay. So thank you for everybody that sent questions. If you have, am I going the wrong way? Okay. Seems like this.
I would have liked to have given examples back then.
Yeah.
Did I? Eventually? No? Oh, that's too bad.
It looks like there's, I don't know which way is like the new questions. Okay, it's up. Okay.
Did you say hi to a couple people?
Okay, we'll say hi to people. Hi, Melissa. Hi, Wendy. Hi, Danny. Hi, Grandma. Hi, Grammy. Thank you guys for watching. She's doing a workshop if you want to know more about the Enneagram and meet her in person. Charlie's doing a workshop with OurTism that you can come to. If you go to the website, OurTism.com, go under events. I will be posting the link on my page. It'll be on the OurTism Facebook page if you want to register. And she will go more in depth with a proper presentation and all the visuals.
Yes, it's very, very hard to explain without visuals. I feel like I'm just rambling nonsense half the time.
Yeah. Can we mention anything else? It's just like always a great thing, I think, to learn more about yourself. And even if you don't identify fully with everything in the Enneagram, which like would very much surprise me, I still think it gives you some tools to learn about yourself. And there'll be certain things you identify with, and that's always helpful, I think. And applying it, I think, to yourself is more important than applying it to someone else, but I think it can be used both ways helpfully.
And But respectfully.
But respectfully.
Well, can it help you, not necessarily, so that you can understand someone?
Yeah.
So, I mean, so when
It can help
you
you.
say respectfully, you don't want to say you're a 7.
Yeah.
Or I'm making up a number. But if you think they're a 7, it helps you
Yeah.
to relate to them and
Yeah,
accept them.
it definitely has helped me understand how different people think, and how, if your fear is so different than mine, because I'm also a 9, and so like my desire is for inner peace, and so if someone else's fear is that they might be in pain, that's going to be a very different type of decision making than mine would be, and that would be what I would think is a more selfish way to react to things. But if that's your fear every day, then I don't think that's selfish at all. And suddenly there's a whole different way of looking at that person, right? Where like for me, I'm like always thinking about other people. And I'm like need to work harder to think about me. Where there's other types that like it's the opposite. They have a harder time thinking about other people. So it like really helps me to understand there's people who think so differently than me. And
I grew up with one, my sister.
And so it helps to
We're like opposites,
Yeah.
but it helped me understand her a little bit better
it
too.
helps you to just get a little bit into their heads. I don't think you could ever fully be like, okay, I understand what it's like to come from that place and have that fear every single day affect you. But it helps you to go, okay, I understand why I think they're being irrational and they think they're being completely logical. Because the way they think and make decisions is not even close to the way I do.
But that's kind of how it is for a lot of people.
Yeah.
We all make different decisions based on different things. And one other thing I would say, I think you are born basically on point myself. I think that while you have different ways of growing up and that can kind of affect the way that you see yourself, I do actually have a belief that you kind of are born on a certain point.
Yeah, you don't change
and
types.
you don't change types, but you might find yourself being a different type than you thought you were before is one thing that but you can't change your personality type. You can't and you can't purposely do that either. I wouldn't recommend it because you'll just wind up being nobody. And it's not healthy to try and do that because you can't really change the way you've thought since like birth, but you can be the best you that you can be.
I know, like, when I have a stressful day, I go to 6. So I know for a long time I was stuck in 6. So I know if I did the Enneagram earlier, I would have been like, I'm totally a 6. And then, but now I definitely identify as the 9. So I think there is that can happen where you're like, oh, this number I identify more with, but it makes sense as you
I would have totally
develop.
identified as a 3 if I took this in my college years because I was totally there for too long, probably. Too egotistical, too arrogant. But I knew too much about myself to be a 3.
Yeah. And then, like, because you have that number you go to on good tape, which for us is 3, there's like, I want to be that number, and so I'm gonna be that number as well. That I've noticed that, where it's like, well, I know, like when I've asked people questions about their type, they're like, well, I know I really feel like I'm going to answer it this way, but I really want to answer it this way because that's what I want to be. It's like, I think I'm giving you the wrong answer. I'm like, you can't give a wrong answer.
You can't give a wrong answer. But sometimes you just don't know, and it's difficult.
Yeah. But I think the Enneagram is a very useful tool.
It can sometimes, though, be a little bit difficult for people I've noticed who have had, either if you've had a rough upbringing, because you can find yourself being in defense, or if you're in the extremely healthy range, which extremely healthy people tend to not look like anything because they don't really have any problems. So it's like, this book is basically just full of, hey, here's all the issues that you have. And it's like, well, do you have any issues? And you see someone's like, oh, I used to, but not anymore. And I'm just like, okay, well, I don't know. Maybe you're just perfect and you don't need this.
Or they're sevens.
Or they're sevens. Oh, my dad, I wouldn't have thought he was a 7 actually at first, but God, is he one. I probably shouldn't say that. I think he's watching.
Hi, Dad. Sevens are really cool.
They're cool. Anyways, I think that's...
And then we're both twins, and both of our twins are very different types than us, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I think...
And you guys are going to do, I think, a talk with siblings, right? Or with twins?
I don't...
I'd love to.
I don't know if we have time before she goes...
Before Lily goes back.
Back, but we'll definitely do it in the future.
Yeah. I would love to. I've talked a lot about siblings. I'm just afraid that I would say something that would make my sister mad at me.
Well, no, like you two together.
Okay.
Yeah.
What if she's not one for revealing much of our childhood to a bunch of random strangers, but I'll try and convince her.
Parameters.
Yeah.
Parameters.
Yeah, we're, me and Lily, I'm a 9, and she's, Lillian identifies as like a 5 with a 6 wing. And so we're like, think so differently. And it's really, and I looked into like the relationships, because it has like on the website, there's like how the 5s and the 9s their relationship worked, and I was like reading, and like every sentence I'm like, this is just our relationship, they just got us.
My sister's a bit of an abnormal one, so not everything totally got us. Sometimes you get people like this, in my opinion, where they are on type, but definitely one type, but it's like something about them is a little bit abnormal, in the sense of their upbringing. Like, I saw that ones are supposed to be raised like one way, and I'm just like, no, she wasn't that, but she's definitely has all of these thinking patterns, so she is one, but it's like different. I guess that's where you get into subtypes.
Yeah. Oh, and then what she said was really interesting. She was like, I'm a 5, but I think all my friends are 9s. And the one time I had a 5 friend, we like, cause 5s like to problem solve, and they like to one up each other as well with their problem solving. But they don't have like this sense of other people, and then it's not okay to push boundaries. And she's like, being with another 5, it like brought out the worst in me. Where like being with a 9, it brings out the best in me, because they're like, hey, there's other people that exist, and you should be nice to them. She's like, when I'm with another 5, we're like, we should try everything we can to figure out the world, even if that means hurting people. Because we're not aware we're hurting people.
I find that sometimes you'll find, I think there are exceptions to every rule, but I do find that with certain types you can actually find that sometimes there are different types that might not be quite as compatible with you. Like for me, I think I have a hard time with 6s myself, even though I have a best friend who's a 6, so it's like exceptions to every rule, but...
She's like, I really like other 5s, but they're not good for me, so I stay away. It's like...
I also,
that's really good that you recognize that.
Consider it a little bit like astrology. Like you shouldn't completely write someone off because of them, because of their type. And you should judge based on, like, does this person vibe with me well? Does this person bring out a good thing in me? Before you judge by their type. Yeah. And you're like, you'll find that there are patterns, but you'll also, but you can't be too judgmental because of their type. Yeah.
So, like, she saw that in herself, that she likes herself when she's with 9s, and that she seems to be drawn to 9s. I'm like, that's good. Because I'm a 9. So check out we're going to wrap up now. So if you have any last questions, I closed the... There's more numbers than that.
Yeah, now there's more numbers.
So there's the workshop. Again, you can check out on the website, OurTism.com, under events, if you want to know more about the Enneagram. Check out the website, the Enneagram Institute, if you want to go over the types and how the Enneagram works. And there's also, someone asked about history. There's history on there. I'll put all these links on somewhere. Facebook. We have this live stream every week, Wednesdays at 7. Next week we will not have a live stream because of 4th of July, but we'll be back talking about ADD the following week. Thank you for joining us. Have a colorful day.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.